Hey, sports fans and friends, thanks for tuning in on the Shotgun Sports Network YouTube channel, Facebook, or wherever you get your podcasts. Please smash the like and subscribe buttons and hit the notification bell to be notified whenever we go live and post. And don't forget to drop your comments and questions into the chat because viewer interaction is one of the best things about doing a fan-sided show live. Welcome to the debut episode of Stampeders Roundup, folks. Although tonight, for one night only, this will be a neutral show. We'll be discussing CFL Free Agency with Scout from the Elks herd and Clay Chisholm from the Argos Fancast. We also have a special guest joining us, and I'm still waiting for him to sign in, so hopefully that happens in the next minute or two. We'll more than likely also talk about that not-so-Super Bowl. Don't get me wrong, the right team won, and I enjoyed watching the Chiefs get rocked. But let's be real, the entertainment value just wasn't there. Let's go and bring our guests in now. Scout from the Elks herd, Clay Chisholm from Argos Fancast. How you guys doing?
Good, man. How you doing, Jason?
I am doing well. Clay, how are you doing? Did we get your audio issues figured out there? I'm going to say no since he's not answering. I'm just going to take him off the screen there for a minute then, and we'll see what happens. I'm doing great. Of course, today's been a heck of a day in the CFL. Very busy, very busy. How have you, without going into too much detail, how have you liked what you've seen so far?
I mean, if you're a fan of the Double E, I don't know if there's anything you don't like here. The tampering window has treated us pretty good. We're still waiting to hear about some of these signings. But yeah, I mean, the Edmonton Elks ended up signing 6 so far today. So very, very exciting times for CFL fans and, of course, fans of the Double E.
Yeah, and we're gonna go into a little bit of detail about each of our teams, and then we'll kind of round things out. Each kind of taking on the teams that are left. Hopefully, Clay gets his issues sorted out there, and hopefully, our special guest also logs in. Give me 1 second here. All right. So yeah, let me just talk a little bit here about the Calgary Stampeders, what they've done. Offensively, I was pleased with the Stampeders last season, with the exception of the quarterback position. I think they have addressed that by getting Vernon Adams Jr. in the offseason and signing P.J. Walker last season. We extended Dedrick Mills, running back, wide receiver Jalen Philpott, and Reggie Bagleton, of course, before free agency today, which is huge. Also picked up wide receiver Dominique Rhymes. I believe that was last week. And of course, he was a huge target for Vernon Adams Jr. in BC. Now we just need to lock up Mark and Michelle, and then I think we should be solid on offense. Now, being an Elks fan and trying to be objective, what do you think of the Stampeders' off-season moves? We won't talk about today's moves yet.
Yeah, I think that the Stampeders, obviously, they've had a little bit of a lighter splash, but some of their bigger splashes happened earlier on, right, before the tampering window or free agency. So Vernon Adams Jr., I think that's a very smart move for them. Go get that star quarterback. Go get a proven number one. Get him in that position. And, honestly, I've been following his travels while he's been traveling with the Calgary Flames as well. So he's really integrating himself in with the organization, which is cool. But then, it also pulls other pieces as well. You pull other players. I know that today I did see that former Elk Derek Moncrief went that way. But I will say I am a little bit surprised that Eugene Lewis did not land in Calgary. He ended up going to Ottawa, but I genuinely thought that he was going to go to Calgary because of that instant chemistry with Vernon Adams.
Yeah, I thought the same thing. I obviously hoped he was coming to Calgary. I actually thought that he was going to go elsewhere, but I'm definitely glad he landed in Calgary. Either way, I wanted to see him or Trey Ford come to Calgary, one of the two. And of course, we did lock one of them up. I'm just going to try and get Clay back in here, see if he's got his audio figured out. Clay, how you doing there?
We hear noises.
We hear dinging, but I'm not sure he's hearing us yet. We got Ryan Messer in the chat. Yo, what's up, fam? Ryan, of course, part of the Shotgun family as well.
Oh, we thought we heard something from Clay. We didn't quite.
Yeah, I thought I did too.
Hey, Ryan Messer, what's up? Has the Forge podcast really?
I can't hear a single thing.
This is the best part about doing it live, right? Oh man. Okay, Clay, I'm just gonna bump you out then and see if you can figure that out there on your end, and let me know when you're ready to pop back in. In the meantime, I'll move on with some of the moves that the Stampeders made today. Locking up wide receiver Tevin Jones from the Elks. Averaged 18 yards a catch last season with the Elks. 2023 was his best season with the Rough Riders, with 103 targets and receiving 65 passes for 882 yards. Scout, how do you feel about that move?
Yeah, and I mean, Tevin Jones, he was definitely a player we wanted to see re-sign here in Edmonton. Calgary got a beauty in Tevin Jones. I think, obviously we're going to miss him this season. His production is pretty crazy, and coupled with Vernon Adams Jr., who has a similar play style to Trey Ford, I think that's going to be a very compatible match. Like, I think that's going to ignite some fire. It's part of like the Stampeders. They actually have not had a bad free agency, I would say. They've been doing all right, and they're adding the pieces that they need. You need a good, number one, number two wide receiver to go with Vernon Adams. So yeah, I mean, Stampeders did a good job in bringing him down to Calgary.
Yeah, and like you said, they're filling holes that they need on the defensive side of the ball. The Stampeders were second last in the CFL last year for points allowed and opposition net offense, and they were last in the CFL for opposition running yards allowed, and third last in the sacks made. So they've already lost Micah Alway and Adam Konar to the BC Lions. Hopefully they can lock up Trey Roberson here if they haven't already. I haven't checked in the last hour or so. But who they did lock up today was linebacker Derek Moncrief, also from the Elks. 3 sacks and 1 interception in 14 games last season with the Elks. 2019 was his best season with 4 sacks and 3 interceptions with the Riders. Not as big numbers as Brandon Dozier was putting up for tackles, but he makes that up slightly in sacks and interceptions. Tell us a little bit about that signing since he came from the Elks. You've probably seen a lot of Derek Moncrief.
Yeah, Derek Moncrief has actually had a couple of stints with the Edmonton Elks. He was also with Saskatchewan as well. Off the top, I don't remember which other teams he's been with, but kind of seems to stick around in the West, right? Derek Moncrief, he's an instant impact. I even remember a couple of years ago when they signed him on, he kind of came in with that bit of an impact, and you were kind of hoping that it would help bring the Elks over the hump. Unfortunately, the Elks at that time and even last year still needed a lot of pieces in order to make that team work. So, I mean, for the Stampeders, they're going to get a heavy hitter. The guy definitely knows how to hit heavy. I believe he also can move around a little bit too. He's a little bit flexible, right, in that sense.
Yeah, and I just got a message here from Clay who says he's good to go from his phone. So let's give this a whirl. Clay, can you hear us now?
I can hear you now.
We did it.
Excellent.
You guys do have voices.
Not sure if you've been able to hear anything that we've been saying. We've just kind of been going over the Stampeders moves in the offseason, and today locking up a couple Edmonton Elks in Derek Moncrief and Tevin Jones. They also signed today defensive back Damon Webb from the Red Blacks. And last year he had a hell of a season, 68 defensive tackles, 2 sacks, and 5 interceptions. He hopefully solves a big problem that Stampeders have in their secondary. And I think they closed out the day last I saw with halfback Adrian Green from BC. His best season last season with 26 defensive tackles, 2 interceptions, and 1 forced fumble. Clay, without going into too much detail, have you paid attention to any of the Stampeders signings or off-season deals besides obviously Vernon Adams?
That one everybody saw, and it was almost impossible not to see it. But the Derek Moncrief one, that was big in my eyes, especially losing all the way to BC. I've loved Derek Moncrief since he came in this league, and he's gonna be great for you guys. I'm just not sure where you're gonna fill the hole left by Cam Judge.
Excellent point. That is a very excellent point. And of course, we do still have a little bit of time left. I'm not sure, when does free agency end? Are you gentlemen familiar with any of that?
Well, free agency technically, I guess, never ends until the trade. Well, even then, it never ends
till the trade deadline, really.
Yeah, pretty much. Even then, what quality player in the league is going unsigned for that amount of time, right? I think really, I mean, the only scenario where you'd see it, maybe a semi-impact player come back like that, is say if you have major injuries, like if you have an injury-riddled team. Now, you're trying to source free agents wherever you can get them. But as far as like these majors, like I would say the first week is obviously going to be the biggest week of free agency. That's when you see the biggest moves happen, because even then you'll still have some players drag out till have a season. Who was that last year? Tim White? Who was that? Somebody recently, I believe it was Hamilton, but somebody waited till like half the season or waited till the first couple weeks of the season because they were holding out for contract. We also saw that with AC Leonard as well. AC Leonard was also in that camp as well, holding off until they basically had to accept a deal if they wanted to continue playing professional football. But that's kind of a rare scenario.
Yeah, and I'm just noticing out of the corner of my eye, we have our special guest has logged in. And he may be able to answer that question because he is quite the CFL insider. Guys, please welcome David Naylor. David, how are you doing? Where are you? How did I lose? I lost Clay and Dave Naylor. How did we do that?
Oh, we got Dave Naylor on.
There we go.
Now,
we got
green or not? Is that
Dave is
there we go.
There we go.
Got it there. All right, there we go.
He didn't want us to see his nice tan he's got from being in New Orleans.
Yeah, it was nice down there. It was like perfect weather. It was like 25 degrees every single day. And the only time it rained was 2 hours before kickoff, which kind of, dampened all the parties around the stadium. It was weird. I was outside, and then, all of a sudden I came out, and it was like everybody was gone. It was like, where was it? Half hour ago, there were thousands of people out here.
So you're just joining us here kind of near the end of my little segment here on the Stampeders. Yep. I explained a couple of signings the Stampeders made today from the Elks. They acquired Moncrief and Tevin Jones. Talked about some of the offseason moves, obviously Vernon Adams Jr., Dominique Grimes. Tell us your quick thoughts on the Stampeders and how they're looking right now.
I think we all anticipated they might be a little more aggressive on big game hunting in the market, just because they look at the other teams that missed the playoffs, right? Edmonton and Hamilton were very aggressive, or have been very aggressive, and maybe part of that is also there are new GMs there. I think if you look at the Stamps historically, they're not a team that has built through free agency. So even seeing them as active as they've been this week, I think is a bit of a departure from what we're used to seeing, because they're not in the position where they have to do that. And I haven't had this conversation with Dave Dickinson, but one of the things about free agency, and I understand why we make a big deal of it. We do the same thing. You guys do it. Everybody does. Everyone wants to talk about it, but we make it sound way more meaningful than it is, right? And one of the things I don't like, one of the reasons I personally don't like to give, passing or failing grades on free agency sometimes is like, you'd look at right now, who would be the fail team in free agency this year? Well, it would probably be Montreal or Toronto, right? Montreal, who re-signed all their own guys. So if you're looking for additions, you're not going to find a lot. And Toronto, who kind of let a whole lot of people go to market for the second year in a row. We ripped them last year. Then they went and won the Grey Cup. 2 years ago, Montreal was the big loser in free agency. Remember? Trevor Harris out the door. Gino Lewis out the door. No one even knows who's going to own the team. They won the Grey Cup. So, and I think that the tough part of this league is, there are lots of elements that go into a winning team, but one of them is American free agents, right? And there are teams that would rather bet on their scouting staffs to bring you players whose names you didn't know before the start of the season, whose names you will know by Labor Day. And, the economics of doing that are advantageous. So, I think it would be a bit of a departure for Calgary to go all in and say, we're going to build our roster through free agency, which is, Edmonton's the most aggressive at doing that. I think it's smart that they focused on Canadians because, that's where you're going to find the value. But you still, again, I would be interesting to go through all the years and find the team that won free agency and see how many of them are the team that won the Grey Cup.
Yeah, I think not only is it smart that they went after a lot of Canadians, I think it's smart that they went after a lot of Toronto Argos since take those Grey Cup winners when you can get them.
Well, I mean, that's what Toronto did for years from Calgary, right? I mean, right into the way they built their staff, was full of Calgary guys as well. So, yeah, there's definitely been a shuttle between Toronto and Calgary the last few years going this direction and now going the other way.
Yeah, now I'm going to turn things over here to Scout now to talk about the latest and greatest moves by the Edmonton the Edmonton Elks.
Yeah, the Edmonton Argonauts. I have heard that one once or twice over the last couple of days, but yeah, I mean, the beginning of the Ed Hervey tampering window, right? Isn't that what we call it?
Inspired by Ed, we like to say.
Yes.
And who was it he got? It was Odell Willis he got fined for, yes.
Yes. And ever since it's been known as. So
yes.
It's fantastic. I mean, obviously, we're going to talk about Tyrell Ford here right away. That's storybook stuff. That's what everybody was kind of hoping for here in Edmonton. Defensive back, absolutely crazy. Canadian all-star, and of course, Trey Ford's twin. So, I mean, it's crazy. I mean, we did talk about it. Even, I was able to speak on CBC, and I think that was my number one target as well, was Tyrell Ford. So, I mean, obviously, we have not gotten the official on that, but there is going to be a press conference, I believe, tomorrow.
Yeah, I don't think Tyrell Ford's representative talked to many teams. I think he's going to Edmonton. Like that was one of the ones that you could find a pretty broad consensus on before the market opened. And obviously the brothers want to play together, and they're both going to be very well compensated. Right? I mean, Trey's not on a high level quarterback deal right now, but I think Tyrell Ford is. I mean, when you got a Canadian who can play the corner and play it well and be got all the athleticism that goes, it really does give you a lot of roster flexibility. And I thought he had a great year. Frankly, I'm surprised he didn't get an opportunity in the National Football League. And I don't know for certain, but I would think he perhaps had some opportunities, but just maybe not the ones that he did. It doesn't make sense to me that he went there 2 years ago, off of very little starting experience, like playing experience. He didn't play that much as a CFL rookie. And got a contract with the Packers, and then sat out a year, came back, and all of a sudden, I can say if he earned an NFL contract or opportunity off of his rookie season, I can't imagine he didn't off this one. And it's not like he's 29 or something, but he's obviously chosen what's going to be a really good opportunity for him with Edmonton.
Totally. And I mean, that's very interesting, right? Like you said, it must not have been the right fit for Tyrell Ford. I mean, you're probably maybe looking at a practice roster or, one of those injury chances to get in. Unfortunately, it didn't work out for him in the NFL in this offseason. And I honestly thought he was going to be sitting at least on a practice roster for 25, 26.
And the thing is that once guys have been there, they're a little more eyes wide open about what the opportunity is, right? And you've got to think that if you really don't and again, I think a lot of guys want to take that one shot so they can say they've been there, right? But then after that, they get a little more practical. And you remember, if you look at the numbers and you think you're just going to be a camp body and you're going to get cut, that means you're going to commit half your CFL salary to an NFL tryout. So if Terrell Ford is making $220, you're basically asking him, probably more than if you get cut on Labor Day, basically to spend $120,000 of his salary on an opportunity to try out in the NFL, which is worth it if you think that you're going to get a legit shot. But if you don't, it's not.
Well, exactly, and signing bonuses as well, right? You definitely need a guarantee behind that if you're going to go ahead and waste half your year.
Guys who didn't. Alex Singleton didn't get a nickel, and he's now on a 3-year, $18 million contract. So I mean, it sometimes works out that way. And I hope I got the numbers of his contract correct, but I believe that's what it is. But yeah, he was the rare guy who went down there with no guarantees. Obviously, a great tape in Canada. Now he had been there before. Right, he'd spent some time in practice rosters and wasn't a complete unknown quantity by any means, but he just started making plays and never stopped.
No, that's fair. No, that's very fair. And now look at him, right? He's still with Denver, so absolutely killing it. Getting back to the Edmonton Elks, though, another big one coming back to Edmonton is David Beard coming in at center.
Another one that we heard before the market was opening. That one was, I know he's an Alberta guy, and I think it was made known to Hamilton that it was going to be hard for him not to go back west, right? So again, starting Canadian, right in the middle of your offensive line, right in his prime, and I think there's a bit of a theme, around everything to do with the Elks of kind of people coming home, right? David Beard's come home, Ed Hervey's come home. Terrell Ford hasn't come home, but home is where his brother. If home is where his brother is, he's come home.
And Jake Resna, yes.
It's like there's a lot of this going on. So that's certainly the vibe that they're trying to create. And again, it goes right when you go the head coach. I mean, Mark Killam hasn't worked in Edmonton, the CFL, but he was a U of A guy. Obviously, Ed and Chris Morris, long histories with the Edmonton franchise as well. So it really starts right from the very top on down to the way they're building this thing.
Exciting times for fans of the Double E when you've had the years as a fan in Commonwealth Stadium, watching the 22 home losses in a row, XYZ. This fan base really needed something like this. So, I mean, nothing but exciting times ahead. Now, once again, like you said, Dave Naylor, we're talking about a team in free agency right now. We haven't even made it to the draft. We don't know what's going to happen come training camp, come, a home opener, and then, of course, Labor Day. There's still a lot of phases yet to go, but for now, people are pretty excited here. I would say, those three. Jake Seresna was a big one to return. Terrell Ford, and then, of course, David Beard. So I think that if I were to pick three, I'd love to pick them all, but if I were to pick three, those are kind of my biggest impacts at this moment.
Well, and you look at among their Canadians, when you look at, Keon Julian Grant, Robbie Smith, Royce Mechie, I mean, those guys stay healthy. Those guys can all be, Grant, when he was healthy last year, was a great player. Mechie and Smith were both very good for Toronto. There's lots to like. That. The question I think to me is, can you turn a team that hasn't been in the playoffs for a number of years? How far can you take a team like that in 1 year? And I think you have to kind of temper those expectations, right? And I see this in football all the time, that it's very hard to turn a loser into a winner overnight with a roster overhaul. I use a couple examples from the other league. The New York Jets were favored to win the AFC East this year. Why were they favored? Because they brought in all these great players from other teams, and we all remember going back to the Philadelphia Eagles dream team days, right, where they had that roster that was stacked with free agency. So, I think turning a team from a loser to a winner is rarely a 1 year process, and it was funny even watching Saskatchewan last season and reading some of the fan commentary there, and I was like, guys, you missed the playoffs last year, right? Maybe they thought they should win the Grey Cup this year, but nobody else did, So,
No, fan expectation is everything, right? And I think especially for fans here, we saw improvement this last year. 2024 You almost made it into the playoffs, but you had 7 wins. That's 3 more than 4. So this year, ideally, you'd want to see 3 more. You want to see 10, you want to see 11 wins. Make it into the playoffs. Let's talk playoffs first.
Yeah. That's one step at a time, right? And that's part of the fans. That's part of the journey of being a fan, right? Is living that journey. It doesn't happen overnight. It can happen quicker in the Canadian Football League than it can happen in some leagues because you're one of 9, and free agency is more liberal in the CFL than it is in a lot of leagues. So there is an opportunity, if you spend your dollars wisely, to sort of shoot the development curve a little bit. And I think that's what we see these teams trying to do. But, it's the classic thing when you look at, as I say, the teams that win free agency are the teams that are usually coming off of non-playoff years. And the teams that, like I say, I look at Montreal, like I got a page of notes here on every team. And my Montreal, there's nobody on it. And Josh Archibald. Like that's it.
So funny.
Yeah, I would definitely
have a good roster, right? So
yeah, I would definitely consider this season to be Edmonton's second season of a turnaround. So you're right, Scout. Let's focus on 3 more wins, making the playoffs, and go from there and see what happens. I think they're definitely not looking too bad. I know Dave's not on here for long, so let's move over to Clay to talk about some of the Argos moves, and Dave can hop in on that as well.
Yeah, give you guys Clay, 10 or 15 minutes at least. Now that we're rolling here, I can give you a little more than I thought I could if you want me to stick around.
Okay, yeah.
Well, I mean, the Argos really kind of started their player overhaul because it's going to happen every time you win a Grey Cup. Even before the legal tampering opened, trading Dejan Allen and Flo Armor. You never say his name. Ormalade, yeah. And bringing back Cam Judge, and then they've got a lot of guys that they're really high on, as far as on the offensive line, and they signed their. As far as I'm concerned, they're 2 of their big keys. In Winton McManus, and I know a lot of people are going to give me flack for this, but I think Kadeem Carey is a major re-signing by them, and he was my number 2 guy that I was targeting for the Argos to re-sign.
Yeah, I think a lot of people thought Kadeem Carey was kind of maybe running out of gas just because of his age last year, and let's be honest, it was the injury history that probably ultimately drove him out of Calgary, but. I believe he played 17 games last year. It might have been even 18, but he had a real strong year health-wise, and his rushing total I think was the second highest of his career. So it was funny seeing both him and Will Stanback change teams at a stage of their careers where a lot of people think running backs are done, and he really provided that. And it's not like he's going to have to be the sole ball carrier. I think what Toronto likes is the idea that they get a real physical presence with his style, and they combine that with Kevin Brown and Deontay McMahon, and you get kind of a bit of a thunder lightning combination, right? And you're going to use all 3 backs. But, I think that was a big part of what they were looking to get back. And, you mentioned Winton McManus. I think, for them, it was really tough because they had 3 premier defensive players going to market at the same time in Robbie Smith, Jake Ceresna, and Winton McManus. And it was always going to be tough to, get 2, never mind all 3. But I thought getting Janarian Grant before the market opened, or during the window, early in the window, was good as well. The Nick Arbuckle, obviously, he's not coming to start. He's here as a backup, although they may need him early in the season, depending on the Chad Kelly injury. But
exactly,
there's still a ton of guys that went out the door for Toronto. I mean, it really is amazing to look at the numbers. And, a lot of Canadians, too. I mean, Tunde Adeleke, Robbie Smith, Royce Mechie, Fraser Sopik, Tommy Neal, Gregor McKellar. Like, there's a lot. And, but again, that I think the Argos front office under John Murphy has played this game before and played it well. But it's, that's what they are trying to do. They're trying to restock through street free agency, and that's what they're going to do.
And they've got these guys kind of in their pipeline that they really like Sage Dockstader. It took him a while for him to get here, but he's here, and they didn't shove him in right away last year. As soon as they signed him, they're bringing him along slowly.
Sure.
He's a guy that can play that guard position. So we technically, if we wanted to, could go, or is it guard position? I mean tackle. we could go all Canadian on that offensive line if needed. But there's a lot of guys that they're already high on that are in their pipeline. Ife Onyeke is another guy out of Carleton that
Right.
that go back to school. You're not going to get the amount of playing time here. And he had a great season in youth sports, and he'll be a great guy on the defensive line, and another Canadian there for the Argos.
Yeah, and that's a key. Obviously, when you have guys that you've either had them in a training camp or you've had them on your practice roster, and you're kind of aware of who you think you can plug and play, based on that. It's the best teams, always do it that way. So there's almost like an onboarding season before you're counting on them to be able to fulfill a role for you.
And I think they're basically bringing back a lot of outside of pretty much their entire starting defensive line, who is splitting time between Edmonton and Calgary now.
And the NFL, yeah.
And that's the other thing. Yeah, we got two guys going down to the NFL, Ralph Hawley and Mackay Polk. We're going to miss Mackay Polk's speed,
Sure.
But there's some guys there that will try and fill in those holes. You can't duplicate that speed, but DeMonte Coxie is a good.
Coxie, I think, is a guy they think has still some upside. As much as he's shown already in his career. You've got the veteran presence of Tavares Daniels. Kevin Mattel, I think, is going to get a real opportunity, and them signing Urgi Mayala was kind of to complement him. But I think they're going to really look for an opportunity to see what he could do in his second season after that was really, I think, when they made some moves during the year, partway through. Rasheed Bailey being released, being one of them, was just to kind of open up some more opportunities for Kevin, and I think they really think that he can be a bigger piece developing in his second season.
Oh yeah, I'm in that same boat as well with Kevin Mattel. The time that he did get touches last year and targets, he looked great. He looked like a guy who could be just explode at any moment.
Yeah,
he's a strong guy, and
some size to him as well. Yeah, plays physically. Yeah, sure, absolutely.
I just want to address a couple comments here in the live chat. Wow, Dave Naylor on here. Great get, Scout.
That was Jason. That was Jason's get. But always thrilled to see you, Dave. Really appreciate you jumping on Jason's show. This is amazing.
We also got
back from New Orleans about less than 24 hours, so it's been a busy day. So.
We also got John Kirby in the chat. Why did the Edmonton Elks get rid of Eugene Lewis? He was a fan favorite, I thought.
I think, look, they're paying him a ton of money, and sometimes I think, I don't know what Gino Lewis' final number was that he settled for in Ottawa, but it's going to be substantially less than he was making in Edmonton. And I think a lot of times when a guy is going from making a premier salary to circumstances where he's going to make less, sometimes it's easier to do that in another team than it is to the team that you were part of. And I don't think there was any hard feelings between him. I think if you look at the way Ed Hervey handled that situation, was basically inviting him to go to market. But I think there was a recognition that they weren't going to be bidding anywhere near the salary range and I believe he took less money to come east than he was offered from Calgary. So that suggests that there may have been a priority for him to come back east, where he began his career in Montreal for a while. But look, I just think I think the other thing is that I think Ed Hervey believes in building a team from the trenches on out more than he believes in spending big money on receivers. I think if you look at his history and his philosophy and look at the way he's done things in Edmonton, that's just what he prioritizes in building out a roster.
Yeah.
Dave, I do got to ask, I mean, Eugene Lewis, he was a very big piece in Edmonton. Do you think that he was genuinely still interested in staying in Edmonton, or the market really did have to reset in order for him to see his value, which wasn't obviously ever going to be in Edmonton?
Well, I can kind of answer this one with a funny anecdote that you guys may have noticed on Twitter. So, I said something on television right before the window opened where I said something that Eugene Lewis wasn't expected back in Edmonton. Okay. and I didn't attribute it. I just threw it out there, and somebody quoted it on X, which happens all the time, and he replied to it, "Who's your source?" Right?
Yeah.
And they saw that, and honestly, just so you guys know a little bit about the way I operate, anytime I ever get, I would say challenged, but where something is maybe raised, I will always step up to that. And as soon as I saw that, I texted Gino Lewis and I said, "Hey, can you take a phone call from me?" And he said, "Sure." But like in about a half hour later, we spoke, and I said, "Hey, saw your comment on my tweet. Like, again, I was leaning. I wasn't saying he's definitely out. I said he's not expected back there. But really, I think from his perspective, he just didn't want it to seem like he was the one saying that. You see what I mean? Like, so, and that was his the issue, not the issue, but that was what we talked about. He said, "I just don't want them to think I'm the one who's saying I'm not going back there." So that's a long way of answering your question. That he was never, "No, I'm not an Edmonton guy." No, he was, I think, just looking for the best opportunity for himself. And Edmonton felt like there was a good chance he was going to find that in another organization.
Well, and
he was great, as he always is.
We always have to retweet or repost, I guess, because it's X now, but we always have to repost whenever we see anything Edmonton Elks oriented, because that's what we do as the fan hub.
Sure.
And I saw yours, and I had to retweet it, and I knew that Gino, follows us as well, so I figured he was going to see it, and I'm like, man, I'm not trying to start anything.
No, we were good. We were good. We just had a nice little chat, and again, he didn't want the impression out there that he was telling people there's no way I'm going back there. So
I also can't remember. Somebody commented or retweeted it and said, if Dave Naylor said it, it must be true. Something along those lines. So
no, I mean, he didn't end up in Edmonton. So the point of what I was saying was true, but there was nothing saying, categorically one side or the other had said absolutely not, and it certainly wasn't him. No, by any means. But ultimately, the point I was trying to make kind of.
One more question here, Dave, and then you can run. I don't know if you're keeping track, but who's the big fish still out there that you can think of?
Boy, give me another page here, gentlemen.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure you got it all noted down there.
Now, again, I went and had dinner 2 hours ago, and I haven't checked in the last couple hours, so a couple of these, who knows, could be update. Alex Hollins, Suk Chung, Sean McEwen, Stephen Dunbar, Brandon Alexander, Pete Robertson, Mark and Michelle, TJ Lee. Those are, I made a list of guys that I thought, would still have a fair amount of interest to fans just because of the name recognition they carry with them. A few of those I'm really surprised at. Sean McEwen, I guess, Calgary guy, been with the Stamps, right in the heart of his prime. Stephen Dunbar, I believe, had 1,000 yards season last year, and again, some of that was in the second half when Bo Levi Mitchell racked up a lot of yards, with them. But so those are some of the ones that are still available. But it was amazing this year, more so than any other year since we've been in this legal tampering thing, how aggressive the market was in the first 48 hours. Like when they first started doing this thing, it was like days and days and days, and deals started to come together, and and then everything was kind of still. There were a lot of surprises when we got to the official part of the window. This thing was like, it was like a buffet table, like, what I mean? 2 days in, it was pretty much cleaned out. And so, I think players realize that once the money's gone, and you better get to it early,
Yeah, if I'm not mistaken, I think Trey Roberson is also still available. I'm not.
Yeah, I mean, there was a report that, and I haven't reported on this, so I'm just getting this secondarily. There was a report that he had agreed to terms in Ottawa, and then I saw Don Brennan of the Ottawa Sun was writing that there were perhaps some issues, and they weren't necessarily salary cap or salary related. So I don't know what to make of that situation. It's one of those kind of ones that I've got in the corner that when I'm talking to Ottawa next, I'll try and figure out what exactly is going on there. So but they certainly did not, to my awareness, announce his signing today. It's funny. We got to watch this because there are a few of the reported signings, and some of them could be ours, that weren't announced today. And some of those are medicals. I know in Edmonton's case, that was certainly a big part of it. I believe the same thing with Gino Lewis in Ottawa. I'm not sure they announced him. I think he had a physical tonight or tomorrow. But then there's also deals that, you can send the contract to the guy, and if he doesn't send it back, there's nothing binding in most of these arrangements, right? They're just handshakes and trust.
Yeah. One more fan question here, and then we'll let you go, Dave. You already kind of touched on this, but John Kirby says, which CFL team do you think did the best in free agency?
Well, again, I got to sort of restate my context for saying best. Like I said, if you have lots of needs and lots of salary cap money, you're going to look better in free agency than somebody who doesn't have many needs and doesn't have any salary. And I mean, Edmonton and Montreal would be the absolute extremes of that. But look, I like what Hamilton did. When I think that they went out and look, we see this a lot with general managers. When they get their jobs, they will often pull from the teams that they were with because they know those players. We saw Sean Burke do that. There was a parade of guys from Hamilton to Ottawa. And, again, a lot of times the guys you're going to pull are not necessarily the star players from that team because everybody knows who they are. But maybe something about somebody that somebody else doesn't. I'll give you an example of a player that Ottawa pulled out of Hamilton when he was a part-time player and special teams guy, Lorenzo Malden. I don't remember when Ottawa signed Lorenzo Malden, everybody went, whoa, right? It was like, the guy's been in the league for a couple of years, played role. I mean, he was third-round pick of the New York Jets, so he's a heck of a college player. But, he won Defensive Player of the Year. And so when I look at, the Hamilton Tiger Cats pulling a player, say, like Brian Cole, linebacker in Hamilton, I don't know a lot about him. He didn't play a ton necessarily there. He wasn't a frontline guy, but would I be surprised if he's a guy that they give a bigger opportunity in Hamilton and we all go, wow, that's now they did also go after some frontline guys, Kenny Lawler, but again, Ted Gavaya would know the yin yang, know everything about Kenny Lawler from the time they've had him in Winnipeg, right? They signed Liam Dobson, they signed Drew Woltarski. There's one more also on the defensive line. I think there's 5 guys that have been pulled there. And then you look at what they did in their secondary. They signed Deshaun Amos from Toronto, and they signed Reggie Stubblefield from Montreal, who kind of everybody, one of those guys you forget about, right? Had a great 2023, and then as the ACL tear, I think in week 3 last year, but when his name came up, I thought, boy, there's kind of a smart signing as well. So, I like what Hamilton did. I think Ottawa did some decent things as well. I think Eugene Lewis is going to be interesting for them. I think with Artie having Justin Hardy as the second leading receiver in the league last year. And again, a lot of these moves that teams have made, I'm just because we're trying to keep the information fresh. All these lists I'm working off of are just from the start of the window forward. We're not factoring in, all the work that Dave did the first couple, but those are, Hamilton. I'll throw Winnipeg in that. Here's an interesting thing to me about Winnipeg. They basically sat on the sidelines of free agency for the last 5 years, right? And now you see they're starting to get involved because some of their players are aging out, right? Guys that they just don't want back because of that. And they've got the same salary constraints. But where they're going hunting is they're looking for value, right? Reggie White Jr., smart one, right? Good player coming off an injury. They've added guys, Jareth Stearns in Saskatchewan. Again, another guy in I thought, limited, sort of, I don't say his role is limited, but he's not the premier guy. But I thought he was a guy who looks like, yards after catch with him. What can he do in Winnipeg's offense? They add Peyton Logan, who gives him a presence at running back and also can return kicks. James Vaughters, they picked from Calgary, who's, getting on in his years, but he's been a player in this league for a long time. I guarantee you none of those guys are anywhere near top of the market, right? But just to see Winnipeg enter the market and say, okay, we've got enough turnover on our roster that we're going to have to bring in experienced CFL players in a way that we haven't in the past before. We've always just been keep the band together and and then we'll add some street free agents. But I thought it was sort of sneaky smart. A lot of the signings that they made, Gavin Cobb, another one, Canadian receiver out of Edmonton, who you guys know, but not going big game hunting, but just saying, okay, what are the pieces we need to kind of be sort of some glue for our roster as maybe we go through some transition.
Yeah. And I know I keep saying this, I'll let you go whenever you need to go, Dave, but I have to ask, since you're talking about Winnipeg, is Adam Bighill going to go anywhere?
At 36, coming off a mid-season knee injury. I believe it was a knee, if I'm remembering that correctly. That's a hard sell. That's a really hard sell at that age, because you just got to ask yourself, say, how many guys are playing middle linebacker at that position at that age? Like, how many guys, period, at that age? And if you think of Adam's game, he's, a highly athletic guy, right? Like, at his best, he is flying. For a guy who doesn't necessarily have a long athletic build, he's a very athletic player. And so, he's not just a guy who was, sticking his head between two defensive linemen and stuff in the run. He was making plays all over the field. So I don't know whether his style of game, how much it would be affected by his age and knee injury. I love Adam Bighill. I saw him down there representing the Players Association when I was at the league meetings in Charlotte in January. Just a heart and soul guy who, and we often talk about sometimes when guys come back from the National Football League that they're never the same. He was better, some guys is like, that was what it was all about. And when that train passes to go back and play in Canada, yeah, I'll get paid. And by the time they figure out my heart's not really in this, some checks will have cashed. And I don't mean the guys say that consciously, but I think we've all seen guys who just didn't seem to have the same drive or heart or desire pre-NFL as post-NFL. And, Adam is one of those guys who, whether you're looking for the tape of him as a BC Lion or the tape of him as a Winnipeg Blue Bomber, he's, all pro all the time. And, I think we can say pretty certainly whether he plays again or not, we know that someday his bust is going to be in Hamilton in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah. Dave, listen, I could probably spend another hour talking to you about the Super Bowl, but we're going to let you go since you just got back from Super Bowl. It's probably been a long few days for you.
It's been, so I got some unpacking to do.
All right. Well, it's been excellent talking to you as always, and we'll see you down the road.
Yeah, this has been fun, guys. Let's do this again sometime.
Excellent.
Thanks, Dave. This was awesome. Cheers, man.
Take care. Bye.
All right, David Naylor, awesome as usual. Great insights. And I love how he can just keep going on and on.
Jason, you just bring Dave Naylor on the show. I'm not prepared. That was wild, man. It was really cool to hear his insight. I think that was extremely special to hear his insight on, the Argonauts, the Stampeders, and the Elks. Man, this is one heck of a show you got here, Jason.
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead, Clay.
I was going to say, well, you brought me on. I was thinking, okay, well, it's an all right show. There's a Scout on. Okay, we're getting better. And then you brought Dave Naylor on, and you just blew it out of the water.
and then Scout gets the credit for it.
Yeah, I was like, man, this is Stampeders Roundup. But no, we shared it to all of our socials. So big shout out to everybody for jumping on and checking out your show. Because man, I mean, Shotgun Sports Network, we're a team over here. We're just trying to bring the best CFL coverage. Jason, you are bringing it tonight, my man. So, hey, thanks a lot for having me on tonight, man. This is great.
Yeah, no worries. We do got some comments here. Darren Popovich, Big Hill doing the JC Sherritt exit, coaching perhaps.
That's what I was thinking. We've got a league where you've got a coaching cap, even though that's kind of not really adhered to as much anymore. But you did see a lot of that as soon as that came out. Like you saw that with Bear Woods in Toronto. He was not brought in to play on that team in his final couple years before COVID. He was brought in to be a coach. It just, technically he was listed as a player, but he was out there to be a player coach. And there's a very good chance that somebody brings Big Hill in to do that if he's interested in it.
That's very possible.
That's the big thing. If he's interested in that, because I know he does. He's got his financial business that he does in the off season. So who knows? Like he's got the mind that you want to be a coach, but whether or not that's in him, I think that's only for him to decide.
Well, and it's really interesting too, right? Because we kind of saw the same thing happen with Aaron Grimes. Aaron Grimes, injury after injury here in Edmonton. And then, he went to Winnipeg, was trying to get a shot there, didn't quite work out, came immediately back to Edmonton and became an ambassador almost right away. And then also a coach, and now this year I believe he's the defensive back coach for the Double E. So, these scenarios happen, and I think it would actually be very smart. That's a very, very, very good point there, Clay. But I think it would be very smart for the Winnipeg Blue Bombers to take him on in, a very similar capacity as what the Double E have done with Aaron Grimes.
Absolutely.
And then same deal, Nick Lewis in Calgary.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, that definitely happens a lot in the CFL where the retired players come back and do some coaching. So we covered our own teams. Let's kind of go off our out of our comfort zone a little bit and talk about some other teams. Clay, what are some of the big moves out east there?
A lot of it was the exodus out of Toronto, but and everybody staying in Montreal. But I mean, Ottawa and Hamilton have gone and done their own things pretty well. Hamilton's going and signing every receiver that they can possibly get approved by Bo Levi Mitchell, because you want him to throw to people. But I think and I'm going to go fall back on the Argos stuff here. That Deshaun Amos is going to make a huge impact in Hamilton. That guy he is another one of those guys that is a coach on the field. He was he was there, giving different tips and stuff like that during plays. If you ever got to a game, you saw a lot of that going on with the Argos in their secondary, because they did rotate through a lot of very young guys in there. But he's going to be a guy that they're going to love in Hamilton. I hate that he's going to Hamilton, but they're going to love him, and he's going to make a difference for anybody else that they're going to put in that secondary if they want to take a flyer on somebody. He's going to make a difference in making the other people with him better.
Yeah, it seems like the biggest moves are obviously Kenny Lawler to Hamilton and Gino Lewis to Ottawa, I think.
Yeah, Gino Lewis is going to be a nice safety net for them up and on, and Drew Brown and can't remember who else that they've got up there throwing balls. But yeah, he's going to be a great one because he's very reliable. He's probably the most reliable receiver in the league right now. You throw a ball into a 3-yard window around him, and he's catching that ball. So that's going to be great, especially since they're moving on from Ackland, and they why is everything escaping me now? They've moved on for a couple of receivers in the last few years that were their reliable, sure hands guys. And Gino Lewis is going to fit that mold perfectly for them. And Lawler, if Bo Levi Mitchell can get his head on straight, him and Lawler are going to they're going to be scary.
Well, I think Jalen Ackland is a big loss too for Ottawa, right? Him retiring. Would you say, Clay, like that was a big one?
Yeah, because he was their go-to everything receiver, right? He'd been there for a while, and they were comfortable with him. The quarterbacks knew exactly where he would be, where they could throw to him in certain
that
situations.
Chemistry, right? That chemistry.
Yeah, and that's good. And they don't necessarily have that coming up with Gino Lewis, but I think he is going to very quickly fill that role, especially with Drew Brown's not super young, but he's still pretty young and green. And having a veteran receiver like that who's been in and out and knows all the tips and tricks that you're going to need as a receiver, and he's another one of those guys that he's never content with what he knows. He's always learning and trying to figure things out, and that's what you got with the Hall of Famers, right? He's never content with how he's gonna play. He's always trying to be better. Man, now that I'm talking, I kind of want him back. I want him over here in Toronto now. I've talked him up so much, but yeah, they're gonna love him in Ottawa. Kenny Lawler, it's for him to catch on with Bo Levi Mitchell. That's going to be either it's going to click or it's going to take all year. And if it clicks right away, look out.
Yeah.
Look out that because that's going to give Bo Levi Mitchell that cockiness back that he needs to be a good quarterback. Because to be honest, when he was trying to be the humble guy, he was absolute dog shit. Right? When his confidence went down, what's wrong? But when he was the cockiest, women love me, your men hate me kind of guy, he was the best quarterback in this league. And whether or not he can bring that back, as an Argo fan, I hope not. But as as a CFL fan, and I want to see all these teams succeed, then I'm not even going to say it. But you know what I mean, right?
Yeah.
Other than that, there haven't been a whole lot of earth shaker moves. Toronto signed a lot of lesser known guys. Ottawa signed guys that their general manager is familiar with. Montreal's very familiar with their people. They signed only their own people, right?
Yeah.
So it's not as flashy as what's been done, especially by Edmonton out west. But most of the stuff is not going to be apparent to a lot of people out here right away. But a lot of the little moves, and Dave Naylor touched on them, a lot of those little moves are going to pay off dividends for the teams out here.
Oh, I got to put this comment on from John Kirby. Thanks for saying dog shit about Bo Levi Mitchell. Hands down, the best thing to say about him. Oh, jeez.
Oh man.
Listen, say what you want about Bo Levi Mitchell. When he's on, he's on.
Yeah. Oh, and I would hear about it for years because my parents lived in Calgary for all of his high years in Calgary, and every time I talked to them, like, God, we hate Bo Levi Mitchell. They're Rider fans, by the way. But going back, they hated him.
Going back to your thought earlier about Ottawa, that other quarterback they signed was Matthew Schultz from Calgary.
Yep.
Yeah.
He's a guy that's been around too that is not really turned out to be what everybody exactly thought they would be, but that's that's kind of right at the time in this league where some guys just all of a sudden it clicked.
Yeah.
I don't think he's going to be he's going to be a good backup there. He can come in and play, but once teams get the new book on him with his new team, he's not going to be the shooting the lights out. They're going to go back to Drew Brown every single time.
Yeah, and
I was going to say Darren Popovich open to the Owls. That's another one of those signings for people that know Oakman. That's big.
Well, he had to go somewhere after the Double E took all of the Toronto Argonauts D-line, right? I mean, that had to go somewhere. And, I mean, Sean Oakman, I will say he was an instant impact player. The guy balled out in Edmonton. I think he was part of a fantastic defensive line. Maybe not fantastic. They did moderately well. But he was definitely a cog on that defensive line last year for the Double E.
And another one of those guys who brings something off the field, too. I don't know if you noticed this, but I noticed this when he was in Toronto. When they came onto the field. They, you go to the end zone to do their prayers and stuff like that. And then you've got the kids holding the flags out. Every single time he goes and he, gives high fives, shakes hands, fist bumps to every single kid around those flags. Every single time he did that. It was the only player that I've ever seen do that. And he truly respects the fans that in this league, and I'm pretty sure he respects fans everywhere. But that's a big thing, and that's going to go a long way in Montreal. And if he can learn 2 or 3 words in French, he's going to be up on their marketing right away.
Yeah. We're running over an hour here, so let's head over to Scout here to maybe talk about some of the West moves.
Ooh, in the West, how the West was won.
Off the top of my head, the BC Lions, right?
BC Lions had quite a few moves, right? We're talking about Micah Alway, which I think is one of the biggest moves, especially West to West. We're talking about somebody that makes Micah Alway, he's one heck of a linebacker. We'll put it that way. He had fantastic stats last year, even in a down Stampeders year. We're talking about 69 defensive tackles. Nice. 4 special teams tackles as well. Overall, and he played in all the games. He stayed healthy. Micah Alway is a beast. And I'm kind of happy that he's over with BC, but at the same time, the Edmonton Elks have a season opener in BC, and they have not won a game in BC in a hot minute. So, what's the lesser of 2 evils? I guess it's BC. But let's talk about a former double E that ended up making it over to BC. Jeremiah Mazzoli. He will be backing up Nathan Rourke out there in Vancouver. Another former double E, Adam Konar. And then, of course, David Foku as well, offensive line. He did all right. That offensive line was his top honors multiple weeks last year. So, the BC Lions made a pretty big splash. Now, they've lost a couple as well. Rugamba comes back to Edmonton, which that will be an impact. I believe I want to say he's a Sam linebacker, right? You could almost, he's going to be at Sam linebacker, I think, for sure. Because there's really, the other linebackers you're dealing with there in Edmonton is Nick Anderson and Niles Morgan. So he kind of fits the spot. But, besides the Calgary Stampeders and the Edmonton Elks, the Saskatchewan Roughriders, they've made a couple moves, but some of their moves have been before the free agency window, right? Tommy Stevens, not that big of an impact. He's obviously going to be a backup if he beats Jake Mayer, or he's going to be QB3. And then the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, well, they picked up Gavin Cobb, Canadian wide receiver who spent the last couple of years with the Double E. I want to say also Josh Haggerty is a bigger move for them as well. Actually, a smaller move for them. That's another former Double E. Reggie White, that's going to be a bigger move for the Winnipeg Blue Bombers.
Yeah, going back to some green and gold talk here, John Kirby says, will Tyrell Ford sign with the green and gold? We believe he has already, John.
He hasn't gone through his official physical and all the hoops that they put out there for him, but yeah, he's signing with Edmonton for sure.
Well, and the other thing too is the Edmonton Elks, they've been pretty savvy with the marketing techniques lately. So the Edmonton Elks, I've gotten wind that there will be a press conference tomorrow introducing the latest edition of CFL free agents that were signed with the Double E. I think that's going to be a pretty special day tomorrow. They have a press conference potentially in the morning, and then in the afternoon or in the evening, there's also going to be a big signing event. They're going to have a couple of these free agents that have come in specifically for medicals, double up, get some media time in there too, and then get some fan time. So the Edmonton Elks, they're playing it really smart, but they also knew what they did here in free agency. They knew who they were grabbing. Like Dave Naylor said, and Anybody that's a Double E fan watching right now or even listening, and if you missed Dave Naylor earlier, after the show is done here live, I encourage you to go ahead and go check that out. Dave Naylor did speak on it. Tyrell Ford, it sounded like he was coming to Edmonton all along. So I really wouldn't be worried about Tyrell Ford not signing in Edmonton. If anything, just kind of wait for 10 a.m. We know that 10 a.m. is kind of like a magic number there. But sometime in the morning, going to be a press conference, and we will be seeing Jake Serezna return, Tyrell Ford coming to Edmonton, a couple of those other names as well, David Beard. It's going to be a big one. And like Dave said too, Royce Menchie, him being signed today, that's a bit, that's got to hurt, Clay. That's got to hurt, my man.
Yep. Yeah, well, and now the next man up is Tyson Blackburn. So,
yeah. Hey, and you know what? Sean Blackburn, former Golden Bear, U of A Golden Bear, was fortunate enough to get to watch him here in Edmonton. Heck of a player, and he deserves that next shot as well. So, like you said, It's next man up mentality. And Toronto, it's interesting, and Dave Naylor's right. Toronto is one of those teams. They built some pedigree. They have guys that can step up into those roles. Wouldn't you say?
Yeah. I'm trying to find. There was a, I believe his name was Moore. I'm just trying to find him. I didn't recognize him right away when we heard it, but here. Yeah, George Moore. Out of Oregon he's an American, but he's a guy they really like and they're really high on. So he, as far as what I'm hearing, he's kind of what made Dejan Allen expendable. You know, when you've got a young guy and Dejan Allen was going to be due a big payday at I believe next year. So, you know, get something while you can for him. When you got the next man up, it's one of those things that I always say it's a great game, shitty business. You know, and that's one of those things right there. Great game, shitty business. So,
yeah. Darren Popovich says it best right here. He says it's all about depth, and that's why the Calgary Stampeders had so much success over so many years, was they had depth up the yin yang. So depth definitely does help there.
Yeah, and especially when your depth is Canadian. That was some of the Argos' strengths over the last couple of years, because there are times we started more than the minimum of Canadians, you know, and very frequently there was more Canadians in there than were required to be in on any given play. So it's the good, and you know, it's not something you want to say, but that's where the good teams stay, is keeping that Canadian depth healthy, because you are required to put that in there.
We're gonna have to use more Canadian players this year too, because of the tariffs. So we're gonna have to keep it Canadian.
Buy Canadian.
Let's just make some of these guys Canadian. Like some of them after, like we had that talk about after 4 years you can kind of designate somebody as a designated American that counts as a Canadian. Just start giving these guys their Canadian status after you've been up here for 5 years playing. Done deal. You're officially Canadian. You know, I know it's not going to be great, but like it's honestly, it's starting to change the way some of these players are coming through the different pipelines. I mean, look, we had a Canadian-born, Canadian-trained, Canadian-played quarterback go down to the Senior Bowl and throw one of the best passes they've seen in that game in a long, long time. You know, that's never happened. You know, so the players that are coming out of the Canadian players that are coming out now deserve spots. You know, you're getting more and more Canadians down south that are making NFL rosters and being impact players. And
Well,
not just the paper Canadians.
It's also cool too, because take a look at the Tyrell Fords, take a look at the Taylor Elgersmas, take a look at these premier Canadian players that are getting a shot elsewhere, and then also getting to come back to the CFL when they'd like. We can shop Canadian here with the CFL, and obviously we know why the roster exists, but it's cool to see how great our Canadian players are. Our Canadians can play football with the best of them, like you said. Senior Bowl, any appearance, right? It's huge.
And now you've got Americans coming up here to play. Like you have, like, there's, I know University of Regina has been great for at least having a couple different Americans on their roster at all times, but you're starting to see that a lot more that you didn't see before. So, we talk about the Canadian depth and all, but it's the actual level of football is just raising, even beyond stuff that I think at least I could have thought of.
Just a couple of questions here for Scout, or a comment on the question. Ed said he wants players who will stick and become Edmontonians like he did. That's why Morgan is back. And asked a little while ago, Scout, now that Morgan is back, what happens with DeBlanco?
I will answer. Well, I will respond to the comment here, and then I will answer the second one with a plug, if I may, Jason, because this is your show. Thanks, buddy. I appreciate it. So yeah, I mean, players who will stick and become Edmontonians like Niles Morgan. This is something we had actually talked about on the Elks call, which we'll get to in just a moment. But I had a good feeling that Niles Morgan was going to be returning. Reason why? The guy has stayed in town, in the off season. He sticks around in town. He does training camps. He does. He has I think he actually has an athletic company. So he does training, and I mean, the guy has embodied the Double E way, as we'll call it. Used to be formerly known as the Eskimo way, but the winning ways, the way of the Double E, however you want to put it. Either way, that's what this organization is trying to get to. That's why Trey Ford came to Edmonton in the offseason, moved to Edmonton, and maybe that's why we saw some videos with Tyrell Ford in the rec center, right? Who knows? I mean, there's legal tampering. I'm sure that the team wasn't tampering or anything, but maybe Tyrell Ford was in town getting a taste of what Edmonton is really like in the offseason, right? So it's cool to see Ed Hervey building those pieces. Now, I guess the next question is, Niles Morgan, what happens now with Joel DeBlanco? The plug, we will have a special free agent frenzy episode of our own tomorrow night to get into depth about the Double E and what's happening here. The reason why, well, we know that a lot of these signings are going to be made official tomorrow, once again, pending medicals. So we are going to have a big episode, and our guest tomorrow will be Avery Lewis McDougall of Avery Sports Talk. He's also a sports journalist here in Edmonton, and he also does some work for the CFL as well. So he's going to be a big guest to talk about the free agent stuff in Edmonton, the free agent pieces. Sorry, it's not stuff, but there is a lot surrounding Double E free agency right now. And then, of course, like we said, potentially press conference, and then there's also a fan event. So we're going to really break down all of that juicy free agent goodness, free agent frenzy over on the Elks call tomorrow night, 8:30 p.m. And we are going to get all of our Double E fans and CFL fans up to date on what is happening with this team, because it is pretty crazy right now in Edmonton.
Yeah, Darren Popovich says, "Oh, Scout, nice tease."
We got you. And a big shout out, by the way, to all the Double E fans that jumped on to check out Stampeders Roundup. I mean, this is a Calgary Stampeders show. This is where you cover the other half of Alberta here, Jason. And, it's really cool to see our fans check it out. Also, though, we got to get as many viewers tuned in to both Stampeders Roundup and Argos Fancast. because this is going to be one heck of a 2025 CFL season. And Shotgun Sports Network, hey, we all got you covered. And, Jason, Clay, you guys do fantastic shows. You guys do fantastic work for CFL fans. So, everybody here, make sure you subscribe, make sure you follow, and especially on X, Blue Sky, and everywhere else, Stampeders Roundup, Argos Fancast. Go find everybody, give them some love as well.
Yeah, the username on all of those is Stamps Roundup on Blue Sky, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, yada, yada, yada. I don't like to mention the other one because I don't like the other one anymore. I still tune in once in a while to see what people are saying, but I share your stuff. But
hey, no, Shotgun Sports Network is a family, right? Like you said earlier on in the episode, Shotgun SSN, we're all a family here, and really, it's for the love of the CFL. I mean, Frig, you dropped Dave Naylor on an episode tonight, so so far, fantastic episode, and it's also really nice to checking out what's going on around the league. I mean, we're talking about day one, and we've had 30 moves, 20 to 30 moves.
Yeah,
pretty crazy for a 9-team league, right?
Yeah, that's insane. Well, guys, we're getting
any of the other leagues would. I don't think any of the other leagues have had this kind of frenzy on the first day of free agency in decades since free agency started.
Yeah, I'm not sure how other leagues' free agency goes. I know CFL free agency isn't typically this chaotic either on the first day. So great stuff for the league, that's for sure.
Blame Ed Hervey.
Yeah, it wasn't just Ed Hervey. Trust me, it was there was tampering. He was just the only guy that got caught. I've had players text me that tell me that they're not going to be back at it with a certain team before I'm going to your son's favorite team, or I'm going to your other son's favorite team. The illegal tampering has been going on as long as somebody figured out you could talk to somebody and get away with it. And this legal tampering, I think, has slowed down some of that illegal tampering, I guess. But to be honest, I think the amount that you saw coming out on day one showed that it's kind of back.
Yeah. You can read between the lines there, right? You know what's going on there. I like how you put it, Clay. I like how you put it.
Yeah, really quickly before we wrap up here, Clay, tell everybody where they can find you.
Well, they can find the show at Argos Fancast on all of the social media networks, and anywhere you find your friendly neighborhood podcast, just search Argos Fancast. Me, I'm All Kinds of Clay, and I'm on whatever social media as All Kinds of Clay. But yeah, go follow the show. Doug and Will are out there too. Doug hangs out on Blue Sky, and Will hangs out on ArgoFans.com.
All right, and Scout, tell fans where they can find you. And Catherine, of course.
Of course. Kathy will be joining me on the show tomorrow night as well, which is cool. But Shotgun Sports Network on YouTube right here. This is where the Elks Call goes live, but also at the Elks Herd on all of your favorite social media platforms. And then personally, at Scout SES on X, and I might be changing all my personal stuff to Scout SSN. So stay tuned to that, because I haven't run Scout's computer services, which is the SCS, for a hot minute. But in general, Shotgun Sports Network, at Shotgun Sports Network LTD, and at the Elks Herd.
All right. And that does it for me here at Stampeders Roundup. Go check out all the great shows on Shotgun Sports Network, including the Elks Call with my friends Catherine and Scout tomorrow night. They go live at 8:30 Pacific time, right here on the Shotgun Sports Network YouTube channel. For myself and my friends on the Shotgun Sports Network, everyone have a great night.
Thanks, Jason. Cheers, everybody.
Thanks, Jason.